The titans of old are awakening once again, ready to reclaim their place in a world that has grown cold and mechanical. Witness the epic scale of our latest series, where legends return to the light of day. Click subscribe now and be there for the return. The night before my 68th birthday, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a bowl of reheated soup and the sound of my son-in-law's laughter drifting down from upstairs. They were watching something on the big television in the master bedroom, the one my late wife and I had bought together, the one I'd carried up those stairs with my own hands the summer we moved in. I could hear my daughter laughing too, that bright, effortless laugh she used to share with me when she was small. Now it belonged to a life I was no longer part of, even though I was sitting in the middle of it. I stirred the soup slowly. It had gone lukewarm. Outside, the October wind pressed against the kitchen window, and I pulled my cardigan a little tighter and thought about Carol. She had been gone 4 years now. 4 years since the hospital, since the antiseptic smell, since I held her hand and told her everything would be fine, even though I knew it wouldn't be. When she died, I sold the house in Columbus, our house, the one we'd lived in for 22 years, because I couldn't walk those hallways anymore without feeling like I was drowning. My daughter Melissa had called me 3 days after the funeral. "Dad, come stay with us," she said. "The house is big. Derek and I talked about it. You shouldn't be alone." I believed her. I believed it the way a man believes things when he's grieving, and the world has gone quiet, and the only voice offering warmth is his daughter's. I packed what mattered and drove the 400 miles to their house in Raleigh, and I told myself I was lucky. Not every father had this. That was 3 years ago. The house was theirs, technically. Derek's name was on the deed. But I had given Melissa $60,000 toward the down payment when they bought it. Money from Carol's life insurance, money I offered freely, because that's what you do for your children. Derek had thanked me once, briefly, at dinner, and that was the last time it was ever mentioned. In the beginning it was fine. I cooked sometimes. I helped with the grandchildren, Tyler, who was 8, and little Sophie, who had just turned 5. I drove them to school on the days Melissa had her yoga class. I fixed the leaking faucet in the hall bathroom and painted the fence in the backyard and installed the new ceiling fan in the living room because Derek said he didn't have time and contractors were too expensive. I didn't mind. It felt good to be useful. It felt like being part of something. But something shifted. Gradually, and then all at once, the way things do. It started small. Derek stopped saying good morning. He would walk into the kitchen where I was making coffee, open the refrigerator, stand there for a moment, and then leave without acknowledging me. Not rude, exactly. Just absent. Like I was a piece of furniture. Melissa was busier. She'd started working again, consulting for a pharmaceutical company from home, and her hours were unpredictable. She had less time for dinners, for sitting on the back porch the way we used to, for the Sunday afternoon walks we'd taken when I first arrived. The requests, though, never slowed down. It became expected that I would pick Tyler up from school every day. Expected that I would be home when Sophie's school let out at 2:30. Expected that I would start dinner before Melissa finished her calls. Expected that if Derek had a work trip, I would cover everything: drop-offs, pickups, homework, baths, bedtime, without discussion, without thanks, without even being asked directly. It would simply be assumed, the way the sunrise is assumed. I told myself this was love. I told myself this was what Carol would have wanted. She had adored Melissa. She would have done anything for those grandchildren. Every morning I looked at the framed photo I kept on my nightstand, Carol smiling at Tyler's first birthday, Sophie not yet born, and I reminded myself that being here was a gift. But I was sleeping in the small room at the end of the hallway, the one without a closet, the one they'd originally used for storage. My boxes from Columbus were still stacked in the garage because there was nowhere to put them. I ate at the kitchen table alone most nights because Melissa and Derek ate late, after the children were in bed, and I was not generally included. When I knocked on the living room door to say goodnight, Derek would look up from his laptop with a faint, impatient expression, and Melissa would smile quickly, distracted, and I would return to my small room and read until I fell asleep. I was a live-in grandfather, a free childcare arrangement, and somewhere in the 3rd year, I began to understand that this was all I was. The credit card was Melissa's idea. In the beginning, she had added me to her account 2 years ago so I could buy groceries without having to ask for cash each time. It felt like a kindness. I used it carefully. Only groceries, only what the household needed, occasionally gas. I kept every receipt in a small envelope in my dresser drawer because I didn't want there to be any questions. What I didn't know for a very long time was that Derek had decided the arrangement worked in both directions. I found out in September, 7 weeks before my birthday. I was going through the credit card statement, something I did every month, out of habit from years of managing my own finances, when I noticed charges I didn't recognize. A restaurant called Aurelio's, $240. A weekend charge at a resort hotel in Asheville, $412. A clothing purchase from a store I'd never heard of, $308. None of these were mine. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time, the statements spread in front of me, adding the numbers in my head. In 3 months, there were nearly $2,000 in charges I had not made. I didn't say anything immediately. I wish I could explain why. Partly I was afraid of the confrontation. Partly, and this is the part that's hardest to admit, I was afraid of being asked to leave. Where would I go? Back to Columbus, to an apartment I didn't know, away from Tyler and Sophie, who still needed me, who still ran to the door when they heard my car in the driveway. I folded the statements and put them back in the envelope and told myself I would think about what to do. I kept thinking about it for 3 more weeks, and the charges kept appearing. My birthday was on a Saturday. A Friday evening, Melissa mentioned at dinner that they were having people over the next night. Some of Derek's colleagues, a few neighbors, her friend Janet from the consulting firm. About 15 people, she said. She was making her good pasta, and Derek was handling the wine, and it was going to be a real dinner party. She did not say it was for my birthday. She did not ask if I wanted anything special. I assumed foolishly that the party itself was the celebration. I assumed my daughter had planned something for her father turning 68. That Saturday, I spent most of the day helping. I went to the grocery store for things Melissa had forgotten. I picked up the dry cleaning Derek needed for Monday. I kept the children out of Melissa's way while she cooked, taking them to the park for 2 hours in the afternoon, pushing Sophie on the swings until my arms ached, and watching Tyler run himself breathless, the way only 8-year-old boys can. When we got home, I bathed them and got them settled, watching a movie in Tyler's room so the adults could have the evening. I showered and put on my good shirt, the blue one Carol always liked, and came downstairs at 6:30. The table was set beautifully. Melissa had used the good dishes. There were candles. There was a floral arrangement in the center that I later found out cost $80 charged, as I could discover, to my account. The guests arrived gradually, and the house filled with the kind of warm, easy noise that dinner parties make, and I stood in the kitchen doorway watching it, and feeling not for the first time like a guest in someone else's home. Derek found me there around 7. "Hey," he said. He was already on his second glass of wine. "Why don't you just grab something from the stove and eat in the kitchen? We're kind of short on chairs." I looked at the table. I counted the place settings. There were 16 of them. Enough for every guest. I knew because I had set the table myself that afternoon when Melissa asked me to. There was no place set for me. I said, "I can bring a chair from the office." "We don't really have room," Derek said. He wasn't unkind about it exactly. He said it the way you'd tell someone the dry cleaner was closed, a mild, factual inconvenience. Melissa made extra pasta. "There's plenty." I ate alone in the kitchen. I could hear them through the door, the laughter, the sound of wine being poured, Derek telling a story about a golf trip, the guests asking questions, Melissa's voice rising and falling. At one point, someone mentioned it was a birthday celebration, and there was a round of congratulations and glasses raised, and I sat at the kitchen table with my pasta and listened to strangers toasting the occasion of my birthday while I was not in the room. At 8:15, the kitchen door swung open. Derek stood in the doorway with a paper plate in his hands. He was smiling. It was the kind of smile I had come to understand was not for me but for whoever might be watching. "Special delivery," he said, and set the plate in front of me. I looked down. It was a dog biscuit. A large one, the bone-shaped kind, the kind you buy in bulk at the pet store. He'd put it in the center of the paper plate with a kind of theatrical care, and he stood back with his wine glass and that smile and waited. For a moment I didn't understand. Then I did. "You've been eating for free for 3 years, old man," he said quietly, so only I could hear. "At some point that's what freeloaders eat." He went back through the door. It swung shut. The laughter from the dining room continued, uninterrupted. I sat very still. I thought about Carol. I thought about what she would have said, what she would have done, the particular look she got when someone had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. I thought about the $60,000. I thought about the $2,000 in unauthorized charges. I thought about every morning I had driven Tyler to school, and every afternoon I had met Sophie at the bus stop, and every evening I had made dinner so Melissa's day would be easier. I thought about the small room at the end of the hall with no closet, and my boxes still in the garage. I picked up the dog biscuit. I placed it carefully in the center of the kitchen table. I pushed my chair back, went upstairs, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a long time. The guests left around 10:30. I heard Derek and Melissa in the kitchen, cleaning up, talking in the low, comfortable voices of people who have had enough wine and a successful evening. I heard Melissa laugh at something. I heard Derek say my name once, and I heard her laugh again. I did not sleep much that night. In the morning, before anyone else was awake, I dressed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone and a notebook. The dog biscuit was still where I'd left it. I put it in the trash without looking at it. Then I started making calls. My first call was to my accountant. Gerald had handled my finances for 15 years, since back in Columbus, and he answered on the second ring even on a Sunday morning because that was the kind of man Gerald was. I need to understand everything, I told him. The credit card, the statements, what I've contributed to this household. I need it documented. How far back? He said. 3 years, I said. All of it. My second call was to a man named Paul Whitfield, a family law and estate attorney I'd been referred to by an old colleague the previous year, back when I was beginning quietly, privately, to wonder about my situation. Paul had given me his cell number and told me to call if anything changed. I had thought, at the time, that I was being paranoid. It changed, I told him on Sunday morning. Paul was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Come in Monday, first thing." My third call I made after that. I called the bank that held the joint credit card account. I explained that I needed to dispute a series of charges. I explained that I had not authorized them and that I had documentation. The woman on the phone walked me through the process with professional patience. By the end of the call, a fraud investigation had been opened, and a new card was being issued in my name only. I sat with my coffee after the calls were done and watched the backyard through the kitchen window. The grass needed cutting. I had been meaning to do it for 2 weeks. I decided, quietly, that I would not be the one to cut it. Melissa came downstairs at 9. She was in her robe, her hair still loose, looking pleasantly tired the way she always did after a good dinner party. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter and said, "I think it went really well last night, don't you?" I looked at her. "Happy birthday, Dad," she said, a beat later, and she smiled in the distracted way she had, the way that meant she was already thinking about something else. "Melissa," I said, "I need to talk to you." She looked at me more carefully then. I must have sounded different. I was different. Something had settled in me overnight, quiet and final and impossible to move, like a stone dropped to the bottom of deep water. "There are charges on the credit card," I said. "Almost $2,000 since July. They're not mine." Her expression shifted. A quick, almost imperceptible rearrangement. "Derek sometimes uses it for work things," she said. "He pays it back." "He hasn't," I said, "and I didn't authorize it." "Neither did you, as far as I can tell, because you would have mentioned it." She set her coffee cup down. "Dad, it's just—" "I called the bank this morning," I said. "The charges are being disputed. There's a fraud investigation open. I wanted you to hear it from me." She stared at me. "A fraud investigation? Dad, that's Derek." "I know who it is," I said. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, carefully, she said, "You're overreacting." "I'd like you to think about that word," I said, "and whether you really want to use it right now." I stood up and rinsed my coffee cup and set it in the drying rack. Then I said, "I have an appointment Monday morning with an attorney. I'd like us to talk before then. All 3 of us. But if that's not something Derek is willing to do, then the conversation will happen through the attorney instead." I went upstairs. The conversation with Derek happened Sunday afternoon, with Melissa sitting at the kitchen table between us looking like she was attending someone else's argument, which I supposed in some ways she was. Derek started with denial, then moved to justification. It was a shared household. Expenses were shared. He'd always intended to pay it back. This was all very dramatic for what amounted to a few restaurant meals. I let him finish. Then I opened the folder Gerald had emailed me that morning. He worked fast when I asked him to, and I laid the printed statements on the table between us. Every charge highlighted, every date. The amounts totaled at the bottom. $1,942, I said. Since July. And I have statements going back further, if we want to have a longer conversation. Derek's jaw tightened. He looked at Melissa. Melissa looked at the papers. I also spoke with Paul Whitfield this morning, I said. Paul was well known in Raleigh. Derek recognized the name. I saw it in his face. He's reviewed the financial arrangement since I moved in. The groceries, the household contributions, the child care, the $60,000 toward the down payment. He has some thoughts about what a court might consider a reasonable accounting of all of that. Derek said, "You wouldn't." "I'm not threatening anything," I said. "I'm describing a situation that exists. What happens next is up to all of us." He left the kitchen. I heard him go upstairs, heard the bedroom door close, heard the distant sound of a one-sided phone call. His brother was a contractor, not a lawyer, but Derek always called him when he felt cornered. Melissa sat across from me with her hands folded on the table, and for the first time in a very long time, she looked at me the way she used to. Not through me, not past me, at me. "Dad," she said quietly, "last night, Derek didn't. I didn't know about what he did in the kitchen." "I know you didn't," I said. "That was—" She stopped. She pressed her fingers against her mouth. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry." "I know," I said, and I believed her about that one thing. "But you've been planning this," she said. "The attorney, the bank. You've been thinking about this for a while." "I've been thinking about a lot of things for a while," I said. I just wasn't ready to say them out loud. By Monday afternoon, Paul had sent a formal letter to Derek outlining the dispute, the unauthorized charges, and requesting a meeting within 10 business days to discuss the financial arrangement going forward. Paul had a talent for writing letters that were perfectly civil and absolutely immovable at the same time. Derek called me that evening. He did not sound like himself. He sounded smaller and tired and a little bit frightened, which I had never heard from him before. "I'll pay back the charges," he said. "All of it. I just need a few days." "That would be a start," I said. "And the attorney," he said. "Is that really necessary?" "It depends on what we decide going forward," I said. "That's what I want to talk about." What I wanted was not complicated, but I don't think Derek had expected it. I wanted a written agreement. I wanted clarity, what my contributions to the household were, what was expected of me, what was not. I wanted to be treated like a person with standing in that house, and not like a resource to be drawn from. I wanted my own space, which meant that the storage room either became a real room, or I needed to look at alternatives. And I wanted an apology. Not a defensive apology, not a qualified one. A real one, spoken directly, without Derek looking at Melissa when he said it. He gave it to me the following Thursday evening, in the kitchen, with the children in bed. It was imperfect. He stumbled over the words, but he said them, and he said my name, and he looked at me when he said it. I accepted it. I believe a man can change if the circumstances make it unavoidable, and I was prepared to find out if that was true. The storage room was cleared out by the end of October. One of Derek's colleagues helped move the boxes to a storage unit, and Derek repainted the room himself on a Saturday while Tyler handed him tape and asked questions about everything, the way Tyler always did. It wasn't large, but it had a window that faced the backyard, and I bought a proper dresser, and I moved Carol's photo to a spot where the morning light touched it. My boxes from Columbus were unpacked for the first time in 3 years. I had forgotten some of what was in them. Old books, a toolbox I'd been looking for, a photo album from before Melissa was born, Carol young and laughing at the shore, wearing a yellow jacket she'd owned for years. I sat on the floor of my new room and went through it slowly, and I was glad to be alone. The financial arrangement was put in writing in November. Gerald and Paul between them produced a document that laid out my contributions clearly and acknowledged, in the careful language of legal agreements, what had been given and what was owed. Derek signed it. Melissa signed it. I signed it. It was not a romantic document. It was not the kind of thing families ought to need. But I have learned that clarity is a form of respect, and that asking for it is not a failure of love. The credit card charges were repaid in full by the second week of November. I received the confirmation from the bank on a Tuesday morning, and I read it at the kitchen table over coffee, and thought about nothing in particular for a moment, just the feeling of it. Tyler found me sitting there. "Grandpa," he said, dropping his backpack by the door, "can we do the birdhouse today?" We had been working on a birdhouse from a kit I'd bought 2 months ago, and never had the right afternoon to start. He'd been asking about it patiently, the way children ask for things they want badly, but have been taught not to push too hard for. "Yeah," I said. "Let's do the birdhouse." We worked at the kitchen table for 2 hours, Tyler handing me pieces and asking why each one went where it went. And I explained everything slowly and completely because that's how children learn and because I was in no hurry. Sophie came home at 2:30 and demanded her own job and was given the critical task of choosing the paint color, which she approached with an intensity of focus that Carol would have adored. Melissa came downstairs during the painting phase and stood in the kitchen doorway watching, and when she caught my eye she said nothing, only smiled. It was a different smile from the distracted one, a quieter one. Outside, the November light was thin and pale, and the backyard grass had finally been cut. Derek had done it 2 weeks ago without being asked, and the leaves had mostly come down, and the yard had that stripped, clear look of late autumn. Everything visible, nothing hidden. I looked at my grandchildren's paint-covered hands and thought about Carol, about the 400 miles I had driven 3 years ago, and the choice I'd made, and how even good choices can become something you have to fight your way back to. I had not left. That was important to me. I had not packed my bags in the middle of the night and driven away from my grandchildren and my daughter because of one bad man's small cruelty. I had stayed, and I had demanded that staying means something. There is a difference between enduring a situation and choosing it. I had been enduring for too long, telling myself it was love, telling myself Carol would have wanted it. Maybe she would have. But Carol had also been the kind of woman who knew her own worth, and expected the people who loved her to recognize it too. I had loved that about her for 41 years. It had taken me longer to learn it about myself. The birdhouse was finished by 4 o'clock. Not perfectly. Sophie's paint job involved several colors that didn't strictly belong together, but solidly, and with the door hole exactly the right size, and Tyler's name written on the base, in permanent marker, because he had decided it was important. We hung it on the fence post at the edge of the yard, the 3 of us, and stepped back to look at it. "Birds won't come until spring," I told Tyler. "That's okay," he said. "We'll wait." I put my hand on his shoulder and looked at the birdhouse in the flat afternoon light, purple and green and yellow and slightly crooked, and thought, yes, we'll wait.